All right, let's get going. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this webinar about the Rural Opportunity Map. My name is Alex. I'm with the Center on Rural Innovation. These are my colleagues, Vin and Chris. We've got Julia on the line from Rural LISC, and we're going to get started. So can everybody hear me okay? Just if you can't, put something in the chat. If it's all good, we'll just keep going. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Great. So today we are thrilled and excited to introduce you all to the Rural Opportunity Map. We're going to first go through a little bit of background about who we are and what the Rural Opportunity Map is. And then we'll go through a demonstration of some of the things you can do with the map yourselves, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end. Julia, anything to add, or can we dive right in? Sorry, Julia, I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself or if I have to do it, but I just unmuted you, so sorry if you were trying to talk and it was muted. Okay. We can't hear you, Julia, if that's any.
I'm just calling in.
That's something I need to do. Okay. We'll get going. And Julia, I'll leave you unmuted in case we get the technical things figured out.
Hey, this is Julia. I just joined. Sorry, my audio on my computer wasn't working.
Quite all right. Quite all right. Welcome. Well, thank you all again to this webinar. I want to start out by thanking Julia and Rural LISC, as well as our other supporters who made this webinar possible, who made building the Rural Opportunity Map possible, and have been with us on the forefront of trying to develop new tools and frameworks for rural leaders around the country to do bigger and better work. So thank you to all of you. Some quick housekeeping things as well. If you have a question at any time, feel free to ask it in the chat feature on the webinar. Chris here will be monitoring the chat. There's also a raise hand feature, I believe, and I can unmute you if you want to ask it out loud. So feel free to stop me at any point. There's going to be periods where I'm going through a lot of information relatively quickly, so I'll try to pause and give everyone an opportunity to speak throughout that if they want. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that we are recording this, and we will put it online so that you can watch it later or share it or what have you. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are from the Center on Rural Innovation, and we're a nonprofit that was formed a couple years ago because of this, what on the screen in front of you. The recession of 2009 was a pivotal moment in rural America, and since then, as many of you are well aware, the gap between urban areas and rural areas across many factors has been widening. So when we started, we knew that we needed to use data to inform our work. We knew that there were tons of data sets out there and from various sources across rural America, and we knew that data had to be a part of our decision-making process for trying to figure out how rural economies have changed and what we can do about it in the 21st century. So what we did was we hired a data scientist, and we started looking through the data. We've ended up ingesting over 100 data sources into our database. We've studied over 300 data sets, and all in all, that adds up to over 500,000 kind of fields at various levels of granularity. And we've really benefited from that as an organization, and one of the things we realized was that if we could find a way to make that data available to organizations across the country, that could be a big help. And frankly, you know, we were lucky to find a data scientist that worked for us, and we understand that not all organizations are that lucky. So with that in mind, we decided to make a tool that would hopefully provide access to the data we've been ingesting and studying, and allow organizations of all types to leverage that data to make decisions. You know, that everything from community leaders, for example, looking to find grant opportunities and funding opportunities. We wanted to make a tool that was useful to housing groups, right, who are creating applications, need to understand the needs of their community and find other communities either to expand or to learn from. We wanted to make a tool that was applicable to investors. You know, we all think a lot about opportunity zones and opportunity funds, and we all, I'm sure, share the worry that most of that, the money that will be invested in opportunity zones will end up in urban areas. So we thought, well, can we also make a tool to make sure that impact investors and investors looking at the opportunity zone program realize that there are deals to be made in rural America. And then lastly, you know, we wanted to do our part to help change the narrative about rural America that's grown over the past decade or two. And so we wanted to make a tool that was available and able to be leveraged by journalists. And through all of this, you know, and as we've kind of slowly introduced our prototypes to people and gotten their feedback, what we've realized is that data and mapping tools all come down to storytelling. You know, there is copious data, as we mentioned, but data in a spreadsheet can't tell a story, and the way that data visualized on a map can. And so as we go through the mapping tool, as we go through potential use cases, I would encourage everyone to just think broadly about how we can use tools like this to tell our individual stories, however we may need to tell those stories, and whatever we may, whatever stories we have to tell. So that brings us to today. Today, we are giving you all a preview of the Rural Opportunity Map that we are putting, we are working on furiously. We have a kind of public official launch coming up next 10th, on the 10th. But we wanted to get this in your hands today, tell you a little bit about what it was, how to use it, and then hopefully continue to work with you and get your feedback on how it's useful and how we can make it better. So today, we're going to go through a demo of a few use cases. And the broad trajectory of the demo is going to first be about understanding how you can, create a clear story about your own community's metrics and assets. Then we're going to use the tool to help to show you how you can use it to find peer communities that resemble your community, or maybe resemble your community except for an area where they're doing slightly better and that you want to learn from, or an area where they've had a success that you want to replicate. And then we're going to go into how that identification of peer communities can help you more broadly understand and find opportunities and inform your work. And then throughout any of this, again, I would love to hear thoughts on it and ideas that come to mind about how the map might be applicable to you as a storytelling tool or as a research and analysis tool. So I'll pause quickly and see if anyone has any questions while I bring us over to the map. Everyone with me so far? I assume that's a yes. Okay, great. Great. So we will provide a link to the map at the end of this, and instructions and more instructions on how to use it and how to be in touch with us and provide feedback. But for now, I saw on the attendee RSVP list that there were some folks from Coachella, California. So we thought we would start by using an example from that. So just to warn you at first, the screen is going to be very busy and there's going to be a lot of elements to it. So I'm going to start really slowly and kind of walk you through exactly, piece by piece what's going on, and hopefully it won't be an overwhelming amount of information all at once. So all I did just now was type in Coachella, California, and I'm just going to zoom out over here on the right to show you that indeed we are in Coachella. And this part of the map operates much like Google Maps, where you can zoom in and out using the trackpad. You can click to drag the map around and so on and so forth. And what the map does is when you search a place, it automatically brings you to that place and then lifts the mask off of the entire state that place is in. So we are in Coachella, California. The first thing to look at is up here, this little box. This little box tells you essentially what you're looking at here on the right. So as I mentioned, there are various levels of granularity of data. Right here, we can choose what level of granularity we want to look at. There's the county level, right? For example, Coachella is in Riverside County. There is the census tract level, there's the county subdivision level, and the census place level. Now, just a side note, the difference between census places and county subdivisions it's generally very confusing. There's a lot of, it's even on Wikipedia, you'll see that, when people create articles about a place or a subdivision, it's often confused. So we're going to stick with just county subdivision right now, but we can go into the difference between the place and the subdivision in a little bit. But for now, let's just stick with county subdivision. We're in Coachella Valley. So we're in California. We'll look at other states later. I'm still up here in the upper left, and I haven't put any filters on. I'll explain what those are in a second. But the other thing to know is what we're looking at over here is the CMS definition of what is rural. That's the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Studies. You may have different definitions of what is rural that you need to use for different applications or for different purposes, and here is the place where you can actually change what definition you want to look at. Oops. So there's, RUCA, there's frontier and remote, there's the FHFA definition, EDA definition, and so I'm just going to go to, this is the census definition, and what you can do is kind of add or remove various filters based on what part of the definition you want to look at. So I'm just going to leave it on this for now. We can get into definitions a little more later if people have questions, but we'll leave it here for now. So down here on the left-hand side, there are a lot of metrics and data that we have built into this tool. And so this is kind of a comprehensive list of everything that's available in this tool right now. Again, it's not all 300 data sets. It's not all 5,000 data fields. It is the selection that we've decided to include for this webinar as we kind of refine what the tool is ultimately going to look like based on what is most useful and what people want to see in the map. So up top, this first section basically tells you what percentage of Coachella here qualifies as rural under these definitions. This section as a whole is kind of all concerned about rurality and place. So we have 3 columns here that compare the local metrics to state and national metrics. these NAs just mean there's no data available, and we'll see below that there's comparisons to the state and national data that we'll look at later. But for the purposes of rurality, here's where you can see kind of a selection of how rural this location is. And we put commute time, average commute time in here because commuting and transportation patterns are so important to what we think of as rural and what we think of as a suburb or part of an urban area. So just moving down here, all of these dashboards pertain to different things. This community section has a range of kind of community assets. So for example, 41% of Coachella qualifies as an opportunity zone, and 63% qualifies as new market tax credit. We have some lines that explain what percentage of the town is covered by what speed of broadband, and what percentage of the town is proximal to higher ed of various sizes. We have other demographic information, for example, total population and population change. And here's a good example of the difference between a county subdivision and a place. The county subdivision of Coachella Valley has 189,000 people in it. But if you're out there and you're from Coachella, that number might seem large. And that's because if you switch over to the census place level, that's a kind of different way to chop the boundaries of Coachella, and that number probably looks more familiar, a population of 44.4 thousand. But so I'm just going to stick with subdivision level for the time being, but we can revisit that later if you have questions. So anyhow, again, we have a few common markers that you've probably used a lot and looked at. Poverty, and that's compared to the state national income levels, education factors, health factors, housing factors. And I'm going to pause before I get into USA spending because that's a major component of this that we're excited to tell you about, but I want to stop there for a moment. So now that we've got everyone oriented as to what data is in this map and what the kind of what the geographic divisions are, there's a few other things I want to go through. So in addition to these kind of area metrics that cover geographies, there's a range of point data that appears more and more as you zoom in. And again, this is a small selection of the point data that we've ingested into our database, but it's what we've provided for the map today in the webinar. And basically, if you click on this, you click on the map legend, you can see what we've included for other types of data in here. Amtrak routes, there's one that goes right through, and then these various points. Amtrak stations, breweries, childcare centers, museums, national historic places, and banks. And so you can kind of start to think about, what are the stories that you can tell with this data and this map. For example, you can look at or visualize by turning things on and off where there might be a gap in childcare, for example. Or you might be able to visualize a cluster of national historic places that really demonstrate a downtown area with a sense of place and authenticity. So, but for the time being, I'm going to close that and get to one of our favorite elements of the map, which we think are going to be really useful to community leaders and local leaders as they go about their work. And that is this function that we've included for finding similar communities. So if you'll notice, there are buttons alongside all of the metrics down here that some say similar, some say greater than, less than, and then there's a little edit pencil. And So what we're going to do is find a series of communities that are similar to Coachella in California, and then we'll talk about how that might be useful and what we can do with that. So let's start with, we've got a few folks that are in the housing sector. Let's think of an example around housing and start by looking at places in California with similar median home values. So I hit the similar button, and I can show you by clicking the edit button essentially what we're looking at, right? We are looking at right now communities where the median home value is between about 144 and 343,000. We can change the bounds of this to make it a little tighter around what Coachella's number is. So let's say about 50,000 on either side. So let's say 295. So let's change this to just look at communities that are about 50,000 on either side in terms of median home value. Okay, so that's got us down to 108 communities in California that share that characteristic. And what you can do is actually layer on different filters to start whittling down that number to find communities that are more and more similar to yours. So let's add on to that let's look at population change, right? So let's say that we want to look at places that are within 1% of Coachella that are growing. So this is, I'm setting this filter to be locations that are either about the same as Coachella or have more growth. And then, when we're thinking about housing and housing access and equity, let's look at poverty as well. Coachella has a little bit of a higher poverty rate than the state as a whole. So let's hit similar, and you can see that now we have started to really whittle down the places that resemble Coachella to just a little more than a handful. I should mention that the coloring changes when you're just looking at places that are similar along one variable. The coloring is supposed to be on a gradient, so you can kind of see the range. And once you start to add multiple filters, because it's hard to layer different gradients, we've turned it to one color. So now we're looking at a handful of communities that resemble Coachella for poverty, housing value, and population growth. So I promised I would come back to talking about USA spending, and that's what we're going to do. So let's, sorry, there's two things I want to do. Before we quite get there, down here at the bottom now is a list of all the places that fit these filters. So the places that are similar to Coachella. What we can do is actually click on them, and they'll take you to those places. And this is an interesting little cluster around Fresno, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 of the locations that were highlighted actually fit in this kind of outer areas of Fresno. So if you click on one of those areas, it pops up a comparison comparison column. So now you can actually look at side by side. We're at Madera, California, and compared to Coachella Valley. And you can look at all these metrics to see how similar it is or how different it is. You can also click on these little links at the top, which again will take you to a Wikipedia page, so that you can gain a kind of they're having a fundraising drive. You can gain more kind of softer context about the community there, and so on. So the other interesting things you can do, and as we're looking at comparisons, is look at this USA spending data. So USA spending is a source for data about places that have won awards from government agencies. And what we've done is taken the USA spending data and put it into this map for the last 3 years. And so you can actually look at what communities have received from various agencies and compare those two. So Madera, so this column on the left here, the black numbers, are Coachella. That's our base community that we've been comparing things to. And the way the color scheme works is the green signifies a lower number than the base, and the blue signifies a higher number. So, for example, up here, Madera has a slightly higher poverty rate than Coachella, so it's blue. Down here, it's also got a slightly lower median income, so that's green. When we're looking at USA spending, we see that Coachella, pretty much across the board, has received more money from the government in the past 3 years from these agencies than Madera. What we can do, though, is click around and compare it to other communities and see, okay, so we've got one here where, you know, as with the other areas on the outskirts of Fresno, largely has not received quite as much funding from the government, except this community here, which is Kerman, has, in the past 3 years, received a lot more money from HUD, which is kind of interesting. So if you are thinking, you know, what programs and what opportunities are available to my community, and you can go find similar communities and look at, you know, what they've won and what they've applied for. So up here at the top, we've built in actually a feature to take you to the data, underlying data for that area about spending, or about the awards they've won. And this is a feature that we're quite proud of. We did just add it yesterday, and there's a lot of kind of optimization we still need to do, and a lot of kind of UI and UX, user experience stuff that we need to make it better. But we want to show you this for now and tell you a little bit about how you'll be able to use it. So this spreadsheet that popped up is, I'll do that again just so you can see, is here, the USA Spending Awards. This details all of the awards that have gone to this county in the past 3 years. Now, we need to, you know, make these headers more clear, but essentially what you'll be able to do is then drill down to where the location of the actual entity that received the award is. You'll be able to sort and filter based on what the entity is that gave the award. So you could, for example, only look at awards from HUD, only look at awards from the USDA. You can see the amount of the award. You can see a little description of the award, and you can actually also follow a link to the USA Spending site, which gives you even more context and more information. So ultimately, you would be able to, for example, figure out how to contact the entity that won an award, maybe if you wanted to get advice or ask how they did it, or see if you know, there was an opportunity for them to share some of their experience with you. What we can do now is sort on various things, for example, and just sort alphabetically. I mean, we can sort by total funding, so most to least. You know, the total awards for this county, the most are coming from the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Transportation. So I'm just going to go to a few, you know, there's EPA awards. Okay, so here's one from HUD, and we saw that HUD gave a lot of money to this county. And so what you can actually do is you can click on the link, which brings you to that database, and you can see more information about what that particular award was, when it was awarded. So this was a Community Development Block Grant related award. And you can get more information about who exactly received the award. Okay, it's the city of Fresno. Again, we'll be able to drill down more specifically to make sure that you can find awards that apply directly to the census subdivision that you're looking at, rather than just in that one county in particular. So I'm going to pause there, and I want to see if you have any questions, comments. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? And if you want to raise your hand with the raise your hand function, I'd be happy to unmute you if you want to say it out loud, or you can type it into the chat.
This is Julia, and I know this is a lot to digest. So also, I want folks to know that after the fact, as things percolate, and if you think about data sources that would be really helpful to see, feel free to follow up with me, and I can consolidate things or connect to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so somebody had a question about where we get some of the data points like childcare and breweries and stuff like that. They all come from different sources. We'll send a link, or we can show it later, to the list of different data sources that we have, and we're in the process of actually making sure that we have attribution for each of those in the map. So eventually you'll be able to see those specifically. I think off the top of my head, the childcare came from a federal data source that the Department of Homeland Security puts together, and the breweries came from a basically Brewers Association database. So it's part of the fun is trying to find the best sources for some of these data sets that aren't always readily available.
Any other questions?
See, it's another question is how often are they updated? And it really depends on the data source, but that is something that we're trying to make sure is clear in our maps. So is when the last update was, and we're in the process of building a code book that should make that clear for those specific data sources. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, and we are updating the major ones, the ACS and so forth, regularly upon new releases. So we try to use the most up-to-date data, obviously, that we can for this. So should we go to another location on the map and maybe explore a little more? Was that another question?
Asking about freezing reports.
Great. Yes, so one of the other features that is in here is actually the ability to download data for the filtered communities. So, right, we have ended up with, going back here to the upper left, which kind of gives us a summary of what we're looking at. The filters we added got us down to 19 communities in California. And, we could add more. We could add another filter to get that down even smaller if we wanted. But what you can do is click on this data download for all filter communities, and essentially you get a spreadsheet with the above data just for these communities that are listed here. Is there anything else?
Also take a snapshot.
Right. You can also, for reports or presentations, you can take a snapshot or a screenshot of any aspect of the map, obviously. Oh, there's an automatic tool over here. Take a screenshot. I'm gonna do it and see what.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress, but basically it lets you print to a PDF. So I don't know if that window might not be getting shared when it opens up the print menu.
Okay.
But it basically is anything you can do from your standard computer print menu, it shows up there.
Oh, great.
Getting shared, awesome.
Cool.
So yeah, so that's basically the two kinds of exports that we wanted to build into here was, one was to get the data, as Alex said, for the selected communities, and the other was to generate a report for a particular location, and that print snapshot functionality is the beginning of that report generator, but we're still planning on building that out and sort of making that a sort of clean, printable, or sort of report that can go into a presentation and things like that.
Great. So, and when you hit the data download, does that includes all the USA spending data, or is that a separate? Is that going to be a separate download?
So no, that would be separate. Right now there's no download for the, when you're talking about the individual.
Right. I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
This spreadsheet.
Yeah, that would be a separate download.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of data in there, and it's in a different format, different fields and stuff like that. So the plan is to make that downloadable, but it's not yet.
Yeah, and that's certainly also publicly available on this USA spending site as well. So you can find something you want to explore on the map and then transfer it to this site and get to that grant or that location you want to explore. So let's try another location. I think we saw someone from Cape Girardeau signed up, RSVP'd. I'm not. Hopefully they're on. But let's take a look at another situation here. So I just went to Cape Girardeau, Surrey. What I'm going to do here, because Cape Girardeau is right on the border with Illinois, I'm also going to add Illinois to the map. Lift the mask off so that we can see things going on right across the border. And it takes a little while to load because I'm also screen sharing, but okay, here we are. So another thing that you can do, well, I'm just going to zoom in here and take a look at what we've got going on in Cape Girardeau. Use the census definition that we were using. I'm just going to lift this up. Uh-oh.
What do you do?
Oh, I know what I did. I turned all the filters on rather than all of them off.
Great.
There we go. Okay. So here we are in Cape Girardeau. This was actually an interesting location from asset mapping perspective because it really does have a cluster of historic buildings downtown, including 4 museums. So that's an interesting, again, story that that the folks from Cape Girardeau can tell using kind of this method of data visualization. Looks like there is a brewery down here along the water as well, which is always a good thing. And so, one of the other applications of this is of finding peer communities could be around broadband. So let's, just for the sake of doing something a little bit different, let's go to the county level. So now we are looking at, this is Cape Girardeau County. And let's look at and try to see if we can use this to find places with better broadband, so that maybe you can then learn from those communities, learn how they approached building out better broadband, learn what programs they took advantage of. So 9% of the county has over 999 megabytes, and you can only get that with fiber. So there's some fiber in the community. It's not everywhere. So let's take a look at communities that have the same amount of access or more. And again, so here you can see how with one, as soon as it loads, you can see how with one filter on it, there's actually the results are color coded to show you the range. So the darker blue has more access. There's more access up here, slightly more access up here, and then these green areas have about the same access. At least under 20% is covered by broadband of that speed. So you know, you might be able to then filter on other metrics if you want, or you can go straight to the USA spending to see if, for example, this community, let's do a comparison here. Montato County, to see kind of how they compare, how they stack up, and then start digging into how they deployed broadband, for example. So I'll pause here again and see if anyone has any thoughts or questions.
I have been answering some questions in the Q&A section if people want to look there either to.
Any big ones we want to address out loud?
Well, people were asking about data, where, you know, if it's possible to download the data, or information about the data. So I provided a link to our data page on the Rural Opportunity Map site there, where you can get information about the data sources that we are using. We're going to be expanding the information that's there in the future, and then also about being able to download the underlying files, which again, currently we don't have those up for download, but we plan to make them available in various formats, including spatial files, like shape files.
Great. And we would love, absolutely love to hear from you. We'll send out a link to our contact form on our website, or you can email us directly. Love to hear, you know, what data you're most interested in, how you hope to use it, and what kind of how it would impact your work. Just because the discovery and learning process we've been going through is really made much better by just direct examples from you all about how you're using data in your current work, how you would like to use data, you know, even what tools you're using, because we really want to as we continue to improve this tool and the other tools on our website, we want to make sure that it's being attentive to how you all are actually wanting to use them on the ground. Anything else?
Thank you. I think you covered all the things I can think of.
Okay, I covered a lot. We've got a few minutes to spare. So, does anyone have? Let's see. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation, and we'll just go to the wrapping up slides. And still feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts. So, go. So. We did the demo. Great. So thank you all so much for joining us. We are really excited to be sharing this with you and making this tool available to you. It is at ruralopportunitymap.us. There are, our most robust map that we just showed you, we've spent the most time on and have been working on for quite some time now, and you'll be able to find that and use that, as well as some other maps that have different focuses and slightly different features. You know, some of those maps are definitely in beta still, so do be patient if there's a glitch or anything like that, and refreshing the page usually fixes any of those issues. If you're really excited about this and want to even email us screenshots of things that you think we can improve or fix, or usability issues, that's all welcome as well. So on our website, the ruralopportunitymap.us, there are feedback forms. We'd love to hear all kinds of feedback. Please tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you can also sign up for our newsletter there, where we'll make sure to email everyone as new maps and new tools are released and as improvements are made. So, you know, when we have the ability to download data or download shapefiles, we will send that out as an update, for example. So, you know, we are working on a sustainable funding model for the product. We aren't quite there yet. We haven't figured it out, but we do work like this for individuals across the country. And if there's ever a need for anything totally tailored or bespoke, do reach out and we'll see what we can do. So with that, I'll turn to my colleagues and see if anyone has anything to add. And Julia,
Sure.
please chime in if.
Yeah, I'll just say a real heartfelt thanks to Julia, who's been part of our beta advisory group, who's worked with us, always keeping in mind the potential needs of the LISC rural partners. And Julia, thank you very much, and thank you for helping us organize this webinar.
Sure, and sorry for being late to the party. On our end, we will send out a follow-up email with the link to the recorded webinar, as well as some other information to make sure all of our partners have access.
Great. Okay, well, looking forward to working with you all again and hearing how you use the map to further your work. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All
All
right.
right, bye now.